The fire is already lit. Sit down, breathe, and listen. She did everything right. She was kind, intelligent, present, admired. She'd been to therapy, read the books, underlined the quotes, folded the pages. In the morning, she meditated. At night, she whispered affirmations into the mirror. At work, she was productive. In relationships, loyal. And yet, there was that emptiness, a kind of silence no one saw, but that hurt more than any scream. She couldn't explain it. She just knew that even on the good days, some part of her still felt alone, as if no one could truly reach her. And maybe you feel it too. Maybe you smile on the outside and doubt on the inside. Maybe you're tired of trying to be the right person and never feeling fully chosen. You do not attract what you desire. You attract what you are. Carl Jung wrote that, and that night by the fire, the words stopped time. Because he finally understood, the love you attract isn't the one you dream of. It's the one your system allows. And as long as you keep hiding parts of yourself out of fear, shame, or habit, the world will keep responding to the edited version of who you are. That's the blind spot for most people. You're not unloved because you're broken. You're unloved because you haven't yet allowed yourself to be whole. And in this video, you'll discover the one real reason behind the feeling of not being fully loved and why it has nothing to do with others and everything to do with you. But be warned, this truth isn't pretty. It's brutal and also liberating.
She said she wanted love. But when someone approached her with care, with presence, with truth, she felt uncomfortable. The simplest gesture, like someone holding eye contact too long, triggered an internal urgency. She looked away, changed the subject, found something to distract her. It seemed silly, but it wasn't. Her body didn't trust love. And it wasn't because she didn't want it. It was because somewhere in her life, love had arrived with threat, with demands, with control, with passive-aggressive silence. Her mind said, "I want connection," but her nervous system whispered, "Better stay safe." Jung said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." Today we know, the unconscious also lives in the body, and the body holds records of abandonment, rejection, and humiliation in every muscle that tightens when someone gets too close. Have you felt that? You get a warm message, and instead of joy, you feel sudden discomfort. Or you go on a date with someone kind, and later feel anxious for no clear reason. That's not madness. That's body memory. Your system only allows the kind of love it's familiar with. And if what you knew was unstable, unsafe, or intrusive, real love will feel like a threat. Calm love will feel boring. Here's the truth no one tells you. You don't attract what you want. You attract what your nervous system has learned to survive. That's why the first step is never finding the right love. It's becoming a place where the right love can land without being pushed away. She was always the understanding one, the first to give in, the one who understood others, even when it hurt her. She knew exactly what to say to keep the peace. She was good with words, good at holding back, too good at slowly disappearing, just so no one would leave first. And people loved that about her. But what looked like love was just a truce disguised as connection. As a child, she learned early, being too honest cost her affection, that showing anger pushed people away, that saying what she felt triggered silence. So, little by little, she learned to be loved meant not being too much. Over time, this became a style of affection. She adapted, she adjusted. She called it maturity, but it was fear.
She called it love, but it was emotional surveillance. Gabor Mate says, every child would rather disconnect from themselves than risk losing the bond with someone they love. And Jung would add, the real trauma isn't what happens to us, but what we do to ourselves in order to survive it. So she grew up, but she kept negotiating her presence for emotional safety. Kept saying, it's fine, when her heart was screaming, it's not. Kept smiling when she wanted to run. And the cruelest part? No one noticed, because she had trained the world to see her as balanced, understanding, easy to love. But what the world called love, she experienced as erasure. The cost of being overly accepted is never being fully known. And no one can love what they can't see. That night by the fire, I understood. She hadn't lost love. She had lost herself, trying to earn it.
He said it was bad luck. He always fell for people who didn't want anything serious, who sent mixed signals, disappeared, came back, who said, I don't know what I want right now, but still didn't let him go. And even though he knew he deserved more, he stayed. Even when it hurt, he tried again. Even when he was quietly discarded, he still called it love. But the right name for that isn't love. It's repetition. A repetition of an old story that the body remembers before the mind does. Way back, maybe in a distant childhood, he had to fight for affection. He had to guess what others felt about him. He had to survive in places where love was inconsistent. And his body learned to love with tension. For him, love meant waiting for someone to change. It meant adapting. It meant constantly proving his worth. Mary Main, who studied disorganized attachment, uncovered something brutal. When affection is paired with threat, like yelling, absence, or veiled rejection, the brain wires love to danger. And in adulthood, it seeks that exact dysfunctional dance. That's why he only got excited about people who made him feel small. He called it chemistry, but it was really just his body trying to finish an old story with new characters. Jung said what we don't face in the unconscious returns as fate, and that every overwhelming passion carries the echo of a healing that never happened. So it wasn't bad luck. It was addiction to abandonment. The heart asked for affection, but the wound wanted to relive the rejection, hoping that this time it might finally be enough. And here's the harshest part. As long as you keep falling for those who reject you, you're trying to do what no child could ever do: turn lovelessness into acceptance. But that's not love. That's an emotional negotiation with the past. She always wondered, why is it never enough? She gave, she cared, she listened, she encouraged. But in the end, she always felt like she was begging for crumbs. Have you heard this one? You're amazing, but I'm just not ready. Or worse, you're too much. She thought it was bad luck or bad timing, but it was something else. She was loving from outside herself. Carl Rogers said, the deepest human pain isn't being rejected, it's being loved for something you know isn't real. And Jung called this a life incongruent with the soul. When you act out a socially acceptable version of yourself while knowing deep down you're betraying your truth. In practice, it looked like this. She smiled when she wanted to cry, said, "It's okay," while feeling abandoned, pretended she didn't care to avoid seeming needy, gave her heart but hid her truth. Not out of malice, but because she had learned that being accepted was safer than being real.
And here lies the root of the rejection she kept living. Those who love your mask never truly know you. And those who never knew you can't actually reject you. They can only reject the edited version you created to feel safe. And that's a prison disguised as control. She thought she was being rejected for being too much. But in truth, she was being rejected for not fully showing up. Her love arrived, but it never touched, because there was no full self to be touched. The love you offer, no matter how sincere, is landing in the wrong place. It's feeding connections that only accept your performance, not your presence. And connections like that aren't homes. They're emotional contracts with silent clauses. Be convenient, be strong, be easy to love.
He called it chemistry. That initial explosion, the urgency, the butterflies in the stomach mixed with anxiety. He barely knew the person, but already felt they were special. The connection seemed magical, but soon came the games, the ghosting, the returns, that cycle that left him more confused than cherished. And still, he stayed, because his body confused alertness with attraction, confused tension with depth, and called it love. Patrick Carnes, who studied trauma bonds, revealed this: the emotional system tries to resolve the past by recreating the same pain in new scenarios. In other words, you're not falling for someone. You're falling for the symbolic chance to not be abandoned this time. And the more someone wavers, the harder you try to prove your worth. That's not love. That's adrenaline tangled with unresolved neglect. Jung would say, every overwhelming passion points to an unhealed wound, and that the urge to fully merge with someone is often your soul begging for inner wholeness. In real life, this looked like you meet someone, and within days, you're already imagining the future. You ignore red flags. You tolerate what you swore you never would. Why? Because you're not seeing the other person. You're seeing a fantasy. The fantasy of finally feeling complete. And here's the paradox. The more intense the connection, the higher the chance that it's not real connection, but emotional activation. And the cruel twist? When someone kind and stable shows up, you feel bored because your body was trained to chase love where it never existed, in absence, in tension, in uncertainty. You don't want love. You want relief. And that turns your heart into a hunter of highs, not a seeker of peace.
She was great at adapting. She knew just how much to say without seeming too much. She knew how much truth to reveal without scaring someone away. She knew how to dim her own light so she wouldn't outshine. And the scariest part? She didn't even realize she was doing it. Until one day, she heard herself say, "I just want someone to truly see me." And it hit her. She had never really shown up. We learn early, being likable is better than being truthful. Being desirable is safer than being authentic. Being easy to be around is more important than being real. But that logic comes with a cost, and it's always the same. No one can love what you don't show. Bell Hooks said, "Love can only exist where there is real presence. Without presence, there is only performance." And Jung, in his symbolic language, added, "The persona is useful, but when mistaken for the self, it becomes poison." So what she called relationships was actually silent emotional theater. She was praised for the healed, light, empathetic version. But no one knew the tired part, the intense part, the one who felt too much. And every time she hid that to keep someone close, she trained her body to believe that her essence was dangerous, that being whole was risky. Her heart didn't want love. It wanted permission to exist without adjusting, to breathe without filtering, to be without translation. And when she stopped editing, something shifted. It wasn't instant. It wasn't easy. But in that silence, where she finally heard herself fully, she understood. Whoever leaves when you stop performing was never with you, only with the character you built to be accepted. Real love doesn't demand performance. It demands presence. And presence is only born when you stop negotiating your soul for company. It wasn't a grand moment. No music playing, no glowing epiphany. It was just a regular Tuesday. Alone at home, washing a cup, she simply stopped. Stopped trying. Stopped explaining. Stopped chasing one more answer, one more sign, one more bit of validation. And for the first time in years, she sat with her emptiness without asking it to leave. That's when she understood something no book had ever said this clearly. Love wasn't running from her. She had never stayed with herself. Jung called this the return to the self. Pema Chodron would call it the place with no escape. Viktor Frankl would say, freedom begins when a person faces their pain without fleeing. In real life, it meant she stopped checking her ex's profile, stopped explaining away the absence of someone who never chose to stay, stopped trying to be accepted by those who could only handle watered-down versions of her. And more importantly, she stopped trying to be good enough to deserve rest. She didn't get healed. She got found. Because real love was never about being fixed. It was about being whole, with everything that still hurts, but now visible, with everything still unknown, but now breathable. That night, by the fire, I understood. Love doesn't arrive when everything is resolved. It arrives when you're whole enough not to abandon yourself in its presence. You don't need to fix yourself. You need to hear yourself with presence, with steadiness, with tenderness. And that changes everything. That night, she didn't get any new answers. But for the first time, she asked a real question. What if I stop putting myself last? There was no miracle, but something shifted. She didn't feel enlightened. She felt whole. And that was enough. Jung once said, "The most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely." And that's why so few people truly love. Because very few are willing to be seen, unedited. But that night, she chose to stop running from the silence, from the discomfort, from the intensity she always tried to tame just to fit in. And that's when everything made sense to me too. Because true love, the kind that doesn't demand aversion, doesn't shrink you, doesn't vanish in the face of your shadow, only arrives when you return to yourself. Not as a concept,
but as real presence in your body, in your words, in your choice to stop performing just to exist. That night, I understood everything. And since then, whenever the world gets heavy, I return to the fire. See you soon.